Hey guys, what's going on? Andrew coming at you. And this one I thought it'd be fun to talk about how Sweden has changed me as a person. Now, first of all, I have been in Sweden now for 8 years. Maybe a little bit over 8 years, going on 9 years. And I am not the same person I was when I came. And I have gone through so many changes culturally and the way I think. And it would just be impossible. Even if I moved back to the US, it would be impossible for me to lose the changes that I've made as a person. So I thought it'd be fun to go into a couple of them right now. First one is, when I first came to Sweden, I was so outgoing and I was so willing to talk to anybody and nothing fazed me or feared me. I was so outgoing, it was insane. I could go out to a bar and I could talk to anyone. And I had literally no issues talking to people in society. Where the longer and longer I stayed in Sweden, I became much more reserved. Now, it's maybe hard for you to see this here because if you see me on YouTube or TikTok, especially on TikTok, I'm being very animated and over-exaggerating how I would talk. And even here on YouTube, I'm talking louder. Where in Swedish society, if I'm speaking English or speaking Swedish, I speak much more softly. I am much more reserved of a person. I maybe went from talking to my neighbors all the time to I don't really talk to strangers that often. I'm much more reserved. And even when I go back to the States, when I'm speaking English, people say that I speak a little bit softer. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just Americans were known for speaking loud and talking out and being super outgoing. It would make sense after living here for a while that I would become much more reserved. It's just the way Sweden is. Society is much more reserved. People don't talk to strangers nearly as much. They can talk at a bar. I will definitely say if you live out in the farm or something, it's not uncommon to talk to someone. If you see a farmer on a tractor, and I've been in the country, sometimes you just wave to one another or you say hi for a second. I have the relationship I have with my neighbors is I say hey. And if my neighbors speak to me and ask me a bunch of questions, I'm freaked out about it. I'm why are these people talking to me? I don't want to talk to anybody. And basically everything I do in Swedish society now is done in a way so I don't have to talk to a human being. It's everything can be automated and done online. And it's really crazy because when COVID happened and everything, one thing they were kind of right about with Swedish society is people don't meet up nearly as much and they live on their own a lot more. That was much more common for me to do in Sweden, is to become much more reserved and stay in my own place. And that's something that definitely happened. Number two is I take my shoes off when I go inside always. And even going back to the United States, and people get mad at me here because some people in the United States are hey, I take my shoes off. We do that in my town. How dare you talk about this? But let's say in the United States it's 50-50 or 60-50. It depends on the household. And a lot of times if you have carpet, I think carpet doesn't show dirt nearly as much as a wood floor does, for example. Because many people that have a wood floor that I've seen don't want people walking on shoes across that. But in American society, one thing you have to keep in mind is they don't have grus in the same way on the ground. So they don't have a lot of those mini stones. If you come to Sweden, they put mini stones on the ground instead of salt to take care of ice and snow. We don't do that in America as much. And because we drive pretty much everywhere, it's not that uncommon, even if it's rainy or stormy, to drive to one place, drive to another place, and then come inside and your shoes maybe not be as dirty. But living in Sweden, you just take it off all the time. And if you don't, it's insane. So I've seen all the stones in my shoes and I've seen everything else that for me now, it does seem pretty crazy to leave my shoes on in the United States when I go back. So even when I see people you don't have to do this, it's just funny how in some situations I take off my shoes and I'm seen as strange for taking my shoes off when I really just feel well, why doesn't everybody do that? But it's weird. It's perfectly common in Sweden for people to see you in your socks. But sometimes, and under certain settings in the United States, maybe it's seen as a little bit unprofessional to see people in their socks. Depending on where you're meeting and whose house it is or something else, yeah, you don't usually go showing your toes so much. So I just find that to be interesting. The only mistake I make sometimes is I put my shoes on sometimes inside right before I'm going to go out, and I'll catch myself walking across the floor for a tiny second. But yeah, my Sambo doesn't like that very much, so she reminds me about that. And then I go and take care of it. But it still happens to me from time to time. The last one I have to talk about is how I have changed politically. There's just no way around it. Sweden has changed me. So it's interesting because I kind of consider myself somewhat in the middle. But I would say that when I first came to Sweden, I was liberal. But I became much more conservative because there were times in Sweden where I just felt oh, come on. Sometimes when it comes to people getting offended about like every little thing. Sometimes like I could look at that and be like, come on, are we really getting offended about this? Come on, guys, are we really talking about this? And I would find myself feeling that way sometimes because I found Sweden a little bit too to the left at times. But I would say over the year, I probably have become much more liberal. When I was a kid, I was actually more of a conservative. Like I was more of a Republican, like a traditional Republican. How not like how the Trumpers are today. I was much more of a traditional Republican and just interested in like fiscally saving money and stuff. But the longer I've stayed in Sweden, I've definitely become much more liberal. And there's a lot of times I can look at the United States, and especially over the last couple of years, I've been very disappointed back in the United States because I feel like we have so much wasted potential. I feel like there's so much in the world that we can do, so much we can do to help our own people if we just change our attitude just a little bit. And I've seen the issue that this two-party system has done to the United States, and this, you only can have this opinion or that opinion. It's just, I've become much more liberal in that sense, where I see the dangers and the directions that the United States can go at times. And that doesn't mean that I don't mean that someone can't be conservative. I'm not going to like call you names or anything like that. I just feel like, come on, like we can do a better job of taking care of our own people. We can do a better job with our healthcare. Like the way we're doing college education in the United States right now, it's too expensive. We have to change something. We have to find a way to take care of everybody much better. And that is something I've been able to see more. Sometimes you have to get out of your country to look at it in a way where you can look at it almost as like I'm still American, but I'm looking at it through Swedish eyes so much, or just through European eyes so much, where I'm seeing the issues, I'm seeing what works well, and I'm seeing what doesn't work well. And yes, I have definitely become a little bit more liberal on that side. I've definitely become a little bit more like thinking that like healthcare, for an example, is a human right and not a privilege. That basically human rights are non-negotiable in general, and that I just feel a lot of those European values, they have kind of attached myself. So I would say overall, that's the thing. I'm a much more liberal person. I would also say I'm much more open-minded. I feel like I always have been, but like people can get mad at me and be like, wow, you change your opinions, you change. Yeah, I've changed. I've gone from one direction to the other direction. You could say that makes me easily influenced and that I'm just wishy-washy and I change my opinions all the time. But I like to think that I'm evolving and I'm growing and I'm listening to the other side and I'm listening what they're having to say, and then I'm forming my opinions as well and working from there. I feel like that's a much more healthier approach instead of I'm on this team, you're on that team, and I'm always just going to defend my team and you're always going to defend your team. Well, then we're not getting anywhere in any kind of discussion. And yeah, I feel like we get stuck in that sometimes in the States. So hopefully we can change that. So anyways, I love you guys. It's always fun talking to you. Let me know what you think below. And if you're an American and you've been like overseas, and even if it's a different country, how did you change? Thanks, guys. And I'll see you in the next video. Hey, don't.